What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and I'm going to be bringing you guys my reaction to Mel Kiper's updated big board. This was updated about 6-7 days ago, so I'm a little late on it, but I really like reacting to draft analysts that are in the major media and have an ear to the NFL, like Mel Kiper, Jordan Reed, Dane Brugler, guys like those. And I know Mel Kiper's last big board had guys like Shedeur Sanders on there, and he's going back to college, so it'll be interesting to see who kind of drops out of the big board and who kind of, makes their first appearance on the big board. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right. And at number one, it looks like it's going to be Caleb Williams. Some big boards have Marvin Harrison at number one. Others have Caleb Williams. Some have Drake May. I think Marvin Harrison is the number one player in the draft. But if you take into account positional value, I think it's got to be either Caleb Williams or Drake May. And I do think Caleb Williams is the best quarterback prospect in the draft. So I'm not mad at having Caleb Williams at number one. Moving on to number two, we got Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a generational type talent, and I don't really like throwing that word around, but I think Marvin Harrison Jr. deserves it. He really has no flaws in his game except for maybe the after the catch ability. He's not going to make you miss. But besides that, he's got great body control. He's got great speed, great separation, great route running for his size. I mean, he's just an all-around great player, great wide receiver. Moving on to number three, looks like we got Drake May. And the gap between Drake May and Caleb Williams isn't as far as people like to think. Some people even have Drake May ahead of Caleb Williams. I'm not in that boat, but Drake May has shown that he can, run an offense, run it within structure, get the ball out on time and on target. And a guy like Caleb Williams hasn't necessarily shown that he's able to play through structure, but he's really great out of structure. And I kind of value that a bit more. But Drake May is going to be a really, really good player in the league, I think. Moving on to number four, we got Jayden Daniels at 4. Now, this is the highest I've seen Jayden Daniels, and I think positional value has a lot to do with this. And I really like Jayden Daniels. He's, been creeping up and up and up my board and everyone else's board. 4 is a little too rich for me. I don't think he's the fourth best player in the draft, even considering positional value. I think guys like Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors, his teammate, and then the two tackles, Joel and Olufashanu, is a bit higher on most people's boards, including mine. But I'm not terribly mad at it. I think he's a top 10 player in the draft for sure. Moving on to number 5, we got Brock Bowers. He's the best tight end prospect in the class, no doubt. No one's even close, and no one's really came close since Kyle Pitts. Brock Bowers is a little bit different than Kyle Pitts. Brock Bowers is more that all-around kind of consistent player, as opposed to Kyle Pitts, who was more of just that receiving threat. I think Brock Bowers is a mixture between Travis Kelce and George Kittle, and I know that's, crazy to say, but Brock Bowers is that good. Not to say he's going to be as good as Travis Kelce and George Kittle, but he's more in that mold where he's got Travis Kelce's receiving upside, but also George Kittle's blocking upside. He's probably going to meet somewhere in the middle and be, not as good as either one of those, but I think he's a really, really good prospect. Moving on to number 6, we got Rome Odunze, and that's a bit of a shocker to me. I think Malik Neighbors is a bit better than him at the receiver position, and then also, like I said, the two tackles I think should be a bit higher than Rome Odunze, and I've been known to be a little bit lower on Rome Odunze, more towards that like 16 to 20 range, and I know that's pretty low for most people, but I don't think you can really justify having Rome Odunze above Malik Neighbors with the incredible season that Malik Neighbors had. So it'll be interesting to see where he has Malik Neighbors. It's just a little too rich for me for Rome Odunze. Moving on to number 7, we got the first tackle off the board, and it is Olufashanu. I think Olufashanu's a 1A and 1B to Joe Alt. Usually in most big boards, they have, one or the other right next to each other. And in this one, he has Olufashanu. I think Olufashanu has a higher ceiling than Joe Alt. So let's see where he has Joe Alt. Oh, he has Malik Neighbors at 8. So, like I said, I think Malik Neighbors is a bit better than Rome Odunze. And I think Malik Neighbors deserves to be in that top 5 area as opposed to this 8. But I'm not mad at the actual position that he has Malik Neighbors, but I just don't think Rome Odunze deserves to be in the top 10, really. Moving on to number 9, we got Laiatu Latu, the first defensive player on the board. And Laiatu Latu, aside from his injury history, is a really, really, really good player. He's got incredible technique. He's got a wide range of moves that he can use, whether it's the swim move, power, He converts speed to power really well. He might not be the most bendy athlete in the world, but I mean, he can get after that quarterback. And if it wasn't for his injury history, he'd be a top 5 player for me at least. Moving on, we got Joe Alt at number 10. And like I said, Olufashanu Joe Alt is 1A, 1B for me. I think Joe Alt has a bit of a higher floor, but maybe not as high as a ceiling as a Olufashanu. But seeing Joe Alt at 10 is just a little bit weird to me. I think Joe Alt deserves to be in that at least top 7 range. So I'm nitpicking a bit here, but as you can see, he was previously 15, which is a little insane. I don't know how he could be 15th. Moving on to number 11, we got Dallas Turner. And Dallas Turner is a really good prospect. I think the 3 edge rushers are Jared Verse, Laiatu Latu, Dallas Turner in no particular order. I think all 3 of them are a bit different. I think Laiatu Latu is the most polished pass rusher, as opposed to Dallas Turner, who's more of the raw athlete but with a really, really high ceiling. And then Jared Verse is kind of in the middle to where he's got a high ceiling and is a bit more polished than Dallas Turner. So Dallas Turner at number 11, I'm a fan of. I think that's a good spot for him. Moving on to number 12, we do have Keon Coleman. And for me personally, Keon Coleman has fallen out of my top 20 probably. He's more towards that 25 to 30 range for me personally, just because I don't think he's a good separator. Going back to watch some of his tape, I mean, he's having trouble separating. I mean, he might be a great athlete, great contested catch guy, but in the NFL, there's very, very few good contested catch guys that's the only thing they're good at, and they're a good receiver. Even guys like T. Higgins, who is compared to a lot, he can separate. Keon Coleman, it looks like he just has trouble, and of course he can improve in that area of his game, but from what I see, he's having trouble separating, and that's a big concern when you're playing the receiver position. Moving on to number 13, we got Cooper DeJean, the first cornerback off the board. Some people consider him a safety, some consider him a cornerback. I think he's more of a Swiss Army knife. I think he can play outside corner, slot corner, or even safety. He's really just a very versatile player, and I think that's pushing him up people's boards. I really like Cooper DeJean. I'm not mad at that spot. Moving on, we got Troy Fautanu at number 14. Having him as a third offensive lineman off the board is a bit too rich for me. For one, he's probably going to have to kick into guard just because of his length. I think he's a really good player, but 14 is a bit rich for me. Maybe in that 20-ish range is where I would have him. I think guys like J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims, and even maybe a Graham Barton. That's a bit pushing it, but I think there's 2 tackles that should be a bit higher than Troy Fautanu, and then also Talise Fuaga as well. I forgot about him, so a little bit rich for me, but not to say that Troy Fautanu isn't a really good player. Moving on, we got Jared Verse, and like I said earlier, I think he's a perfect mix between high upside, but also a more polished edge rusher as opposed to a guy like Dallas Turner. I'm a big fan of Jared Verse. I think he would have been a top 10 pick in last year's draft, and he hasn't had the best season this season. He picked it up more towards the end of the season. So I think once he goes through this draft process, when he goes through the combine, pro day, things like that, I think he'll rise up a bit more, and I do think he'll ultimately be a top 10 pick. So at 15, it's a bit too low for me, but I understand why. Moving on to number 16, we do have Jerzon Newton, and I know a lot of analysts like Dane Brugler, Mel Kiper, Jordan Reed have an ear to the NFL, and they're saying that Jerzon Newton might not be viewed as a first-round talent due to his size. But for that, I say, if Kalijah Kancey can be a first-round player, I don't see why Jerzon Newton can't. They're both undersized, but they're both really, really quick off the line of scrimmage and can get into the backfield in a hurry. So I think he's ultimately going to be a first-round pick, and the 16 range is a perfect spot for him, in my opinion. So I really like this one. Moving on, we got Xavier Worthy at 17. That's way too rich for my liking. He's an absolute speedster, that's for sure, and it looks like previously he was 20 and now he's 17, so he's even rising on Mel Kiper's big board, which, I just think he's a bit too small at 172. That's, pretty slim for my liking, and receivers like Tank Dell, Devontae Smith have shown that, size isn't as big of a concern in today's NFL as it was in previous years. But I also have concerns with his hands. I know not this season, but the season before, he had a big drop problem, and I know he had a broken hand or a broken bone in his hand, so that could have been contributing to it, but I need to see more polish from him. For right now, all I see as him is kind of like a Jalen Hyatt from last year. Amazing speed, but is he more than just that? I'm not too sure as of right now. Moving on, at 18, we got Nate Wiggins, the cornerback. Now, Nate Wiggins is leaning towards my number one cornerback as of right now. He's an extremely long cornerback at 6'2", with really good arm length. He's got really good speed, good makeup speed. He's really good in coverage. Like, Nate Wiggins is probably a bit too low in my opinion. I mean, he was 24, moving up to 18. I think he's going to keep moving up as time goes on. Moving on to number 19, we got Talise Fuaga. Like I said, I think he should be a bit higher than Troy Fautanu. He's a really good power run blocker, super physical, and I think he's going to, rise up a lot of people's boards in my opinion. He's rising up mine for sure. On to number 20, we got J.C. Latham. And J.C. Latham is a massive man. You can see right here, 6'6", 360 pounds. And he's a mauler in the run game. So if you need a right tackle that's an absolute mauler, J.C. Latham is your guy. I really like J.C. Latham. I think he's a bit raw when it comes to his pass protection. I think he needs to work on his technique a bit. But as of right now, he's a really good run blocker and can look to improve once he gets to the NFL with his technique. On to number 21, we got back-to-back Alabama players with Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback. And I really like him. I don't think he's too far off from a Nate Wiggins and Cooper DeJean. 21 is a bit too low for my liking. He's a really athletic guy, great speed, really sticky in man coverage. Maybe he could work on his zone coverage ability a bit. But, I mean, he's got really good ball skills, really good speed. I really like Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think he's got the potential to be a big riser come the draft combine and pro day, just because of his athletic traits. Moving on to number 22, we got Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia. Now, he could return, we don't know yet. He was banged up most of the season this season, and he hasn't played much football at the college level in general. But when he has played, he's been really, really good. So I think going back a year would do him wonders. I think he could be a top 10 player in the draft if he comes back to school. But as of right now, 22 is a pretty good range for me, just because we haven't seen him play as much as we would like. So this 20 range I like. And now we're going back-to-back Georgia players with Kamari Lassiter, the cornerback. And Kamari Lassiter is another, lockdown corner. He's been playing really good. I don't think he's allowed a touchdown this season, so he's a really good coverage corner who doesn't really allow many big plays. So I like Kamari Lassiter a lot. I think he is a first-round corner, and I feel like that's a bit of a question right now. Is he a first-round corner or is he a second-round corner? I like him in the first round, but definitely towards the back end of the first round, to like the Eagles maybe, or even the Ravens. Moving on to number 24, we got Jordan Morgan, the tackle out of Arizona. And ever since he tore his ACL about a year ago, I mean, he's been playing really, really good. But the question is the ACL, some people, he might not pass some teams' medical checks. But I mean, he's a really consistent tackle with really, really good hands. And he's got really good movement skills as well. I really like Jordan Morgan. 24 is a really good range for me. Moving on to 25, we got T'Vondre Sweat. I've been seeing T'Vondre Sweat in a lot of people's top 32. And I can't quite get there yet. I think T'Vondre Sweat's a top 50 player. I think he's more athletic than you would think, seeing that 6'4", 362-pound frame. I think he's got pass rush upside, although he hasn't quite shown that yet. But he's a really good run blocker with pass rushing upside. And that spells first round for most people, but I just can't quite get there yet. I'd like to see how he tests out at the Combine and Pro Day. And that's going to do it. I could go over the rankings. Maybe we'll save that for another video. So that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of Mel Kiper's big board. Let me know what you guys think of my opinions. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.